Welcome to the Lead at the Top of Your Game podcast, where we equipped you to more effectively lead your seat at any employer, business, or industry in which you choose to play. Each week, we help you sharpen your leadership acumen by cracking open the playbooks of dynamic leaders who are doing big things in their professional endeavors. And now your host, leadership tactics and organizational development expert, Karen Farrell Rhodes.
Hello, my superstars. This is Karen, and welcome to another episode of the Lead at the Top of Your Game podcast. We have a tremendous guest on the show today, and I cannot wait to dive into some very rich conversation on a topic that's near and dear to all of our hearts. We are so pleased to have on today's show Mr. Bahari Harris, and he is the Senior Vice President and Director of Financial Inclusion Initiatives at Truist Financial Corporation. And Truist is one of the nation's leading bank holding companies. And Bahari leads very dynamic programs such as a partnership with Operation Hope, workplace banking, and student banking at Florida State University, among others. And I can't wait to dive in to have Bahari share his insights on, what are inclusive financial systems, or do they even exist these days? And what are some of the ways that traditional banking is evolving to support economic mobility within our communities? So welcome to the podcast, Bahari.
Hey, thanks so much, Karen. It's great to be here.
Oh, it is absolutely fantastic to have you. And as I was mentioning before the show, I don't think 30 minutes is going to be enough time for everything we want to dive into, but we're going to do our best, right?
All right, let's go.
All right. Well, before we dive into your area of expertise, we always love to know just a little bit more about our guests. So for just as much as you feel comfortable, can you give us a sneak peek into your life outside of work?
Yeah, no, absolutely. And so I am married. I've been married for 18 years. We have one child, a son. And for fun, outside of work, my wife and I really enjoy Latin dancing. She enjoys it. I'm kind of addicted to it. So
she's just your partner, huh?
Exactly. So all forms, salsa, merengue, cha-cha-cha, bachata. Yeah, so I just love it.
Wow. That is amazing. And what a great activity for you all to share in as well.
Yeah.
So
Absolutely.
well, one of these days we're going to see you all on Dancing with the Stars, right?
Okay. That would be a lot of fun. That's a lot of work, but that's a lot of fun.
I know, a lot of work from what I hear behind the scenes.
Absolutely.
Well, thanks so much for that bite of your personal life. We really appreciate it. So let's turn the tables a bit and start off by, if you don't mind, if you wouldn't share just maybe some of the highlights of your career and then what led you to Truist.
Yeah, no, thanks for the question. So I went to Virginia Tech for undergrad, and I double major. Can't ever really figure out what I want to do when I grow up, so I just kind of have to do it all. So
Right.
I double majored in business management and in Spanish. I actually got a dual degree, BS in business management and BA in Spanish.
Nice.
And after I graduated, I really wanted to make an impact with my career. And so I decided to go into the nonprofit sector. And I started a nonprofit called Urban Hope. And in Urban Hope, we work with urban youth and their families primarily around the issues of financial literacy and entrepreneurship.
Nice.
So I ran that for 11 years and wore every hat in the business. So I was the CEO, the chief marketing officer, the chief development officer, but grew that to a year-round programming with our biggest piece being a summer camp for kids from 5th grade through the 10th grade.
Oh, nice.
What I began to observe in the community, because not only did I work in this community, but I lived in this community, was that we were within a 5-minute walking distance of about 4 mainline banks, and there was a large credit union that was there too. But we were we were bookended by two thriving check cashing places. And
Yeah.
I could not figure out, like, why are these check cashing places, able to thrive, basically across the street from these banks,
Right.
till I figured out that it was my families that were the primary customers of those institutions.
Mhm.
And that really it really put a burden in my heart to figure out, wait, how can we help these families have more access to traditional banking? Because although the systems with the check cashing places are accessible, they're very expensive, right? They're very expensive
Very.
forms of financial services. And so thus began my journey back to grad school. I went to a world-class university in my backyard, Duke University. Again, can't ever quite figure out what I want to do when I grow up. And so I double mastered, got a master of business administration and a master of public policy.
Mm.
And, even at that time, I knew that if I wanted to make a true impact with my life, I had to have the languages, not only of the nonprofit sector, but
Mhm.
also of corporate America
Right.
and also of policy, because it's really at the nexus of the three where you have the biggest change that happens, right? And so I went through that 3-year program, had an internship actually at Bank of America, and then I took a full time role with that bank before heading to Truist. So
Mhm.
I was at Bank of America for about 5.5 years, doing the work very much so of what I do now, community banking, primarily in low to moderate income spaces, driving the strategy there. And then in 2021, so right during COVID, I was recruited over to Truist, where I continue the work in financial inclusion.
Oh, what an rich and inspiring background. And it so resonated with me because I do a lot of volunteer and service work as well. And I remember being approved uh, to help with foster children who are aging out of the system.
Hmm.
And one of the things we did was a financial workshop. And I kid you not, was, sitting in a group. It was probably about 30 or so kids who were aging out of foster care. And it was a fellow bank that was helping to co-sponsor the session. And not a single one in the room knew that they could get an account at a bank. They had only known check cash in
Yep.
stores. And they thought the fees that were charged were just the cost of life. They did
Hmm.
not know there were alternatives, and we actually, helped them to get a free checking account, set that
Yeah.
up for them, as I'm sure many of your programs you do as well. But I think, especially those of us in the business world and professional worlds, we underestimate the underserved communities and the lack of knowledge of financial literacy amongst some of the more vulnerable communities out there. So I just give you and your team kudos for all that
Thank
you're
you.
doing in this space.
Yeah. Yeah. No, thank
Yeah.
you so much. And to your point, if you don't really understand financial services, and if you have been actually part of that system where you have those alternative financial services,
Mm-hmm.
that is your reality, right?
Yes.
So
Yes.
if you face a disruption somewhere, like either your mom or sorry, or your parents or your grandparents, right, that
Mm-hmm.
tends to go down to the second and third generation. And so,
Yes.
yeah, so it was many of my kids that we were teaching when I was a nonprofit. We were teaching them for the first time about the financial system, about the banking system, et cetera, right, to really help them to understand. I always like to say there are certain things that are caught, right,
Mm-hmm.
around the dinner table, in the
Right.
car ride, right, about
Right.
about life, right, and about the reality, especially when it comes to finances. And there's other things that are taught, right? There are other
Yeah,
things that
that's
are
right.
taught in the classroom. And
Mm-hmm.
so and we did a little bit of both, right, to make sure that our kids were the most prepared for their futures.
I love that. I absolutely love that. And to your point, I'll just share in my family, I mean, my parents were probably the first generation that really became deeply
Yeah.
financial literate about all the options that were out there. They were the first ones to, purchase
Yep.
stocks and have a diverse portfolio and things like that. But they taught that to me, and I have passed that on to our children as well. But to your
Yep.
point, if you have the knowledge as a parent, that's when you try to give it. I'd love to do a double click down on, your role at Truist. And I know you have, some personal efforts that you do as well, programs and such. But I'd love to have you share with the audience, some of the programs that you're involved in on helping to get that information out to those that need it.
Yeah, yeah. Well, at Truist, we are a value-driven company, and we live according not only to our values but to our purpose.
Mm-hmm.
And it's really important that as we design our products and services, that we live up to that purpose. At Truist, our purpose is to inspire and build better lives and communities.
Mm-hmm.
And that's exactly what we do on a day in and day out basis. I just have the privilege of being there where the rubber hits the road many times for those that are new to banking or being reintroduced into banking.
Mm-hmm.
One of the things that one of the programs, initiatives that I'm the most proud of is something that we started years ago around emergency savings. Had the opportunity back in 2021 to start a initiative called Start Save Win. And this was for new to saving clients, right? So new savers, new savings accounts, who were just getting started on that journey, and so they needed an incentive, right? An incentive
Mm-hmm.
around how do do this well. And so what we did was, it was really interesting at the time. We incentivized them around their own money, right? So we had a sweepstakes style program where for each $25 that you saved of your own money, we put that into an entry, and you had up to 5 entries to win some micro prizes. So
Okay.
$100 up to $500, right? You could win.
Nice.
It was so incredible, right, to see the response to that, right? We started over 25,000 new accounts, right, through that
Wow.
initiative. It was incredible, right? And we
Wow.
were into the millions that we were able to help people save. Again, this is their own money, right?
Right.
That they're saving, right? And so it was, again, an incredible initiative, where, again, when it comes down to savings, it's all about behaviors, right? So it's
Right.
not about the dollars necessarily that you have to save. Like, we always teach, hey, pay yourself first, right?
Mm-hmm.
Don't save just the leftovers. Pay yourself first, right? And the best way to do that is through automatic savings features, right? So that's
Yes.
the automatic transfers that you have going from perhaps from your checking to your savings account, or even better, have a direct draft coming out of your paycheck, right?
Mm-hmm.
Going into a
Where you
savings
don't even
account.
see it, right?
You don't miss it, right? And
Yeah.
that sets up that behavior to where, when you see that going up and you know that you have a safety cushion, right?
Mm-hmm.
You're less nervous, right? About
Right.
making ends meet, about falling into debt, or about having an emergency, because you have something to fall back on, right?
Right.
And so, and what the statistics show is that even in times, for instance, during COVID, right?
Mm-hmm.
Um, People who had a savings behavior, started a savings behavior before COVID, actually continued during COVID. Although many of us were living in our savings accounts, right, with all the economic disruptions, um,
Right.
many folks who started that savings behavior did not disrupt it during COVID. And so that
Mm.
just showed all of us that, yes, people do have the ability to save. And so many times they just need that incentive or that nudge to make that behavior change. Again, it's not about the dollar amount, it's about the behavior.
No, absolutely. It's about the behavior. And I know we talked about just the lack of knowledge or experience generationally, but are there other barriers that you see kind of out in the workforce or community or whatever, that other barriers to folks being able to um, be more financial literate and actually build upon their savings and manage it appropriately? Because it's one thing to save, but it's another thing
Mhm.
to manage it effectively,
Right.
um, to help it grow. So, any
Yeah.
other friction out there that we should be aware of?
Yeah, yeah. Many times it's the fear of the unknown, right? So earlier I talked about the check cashing places, right?
Mhm.
And the check cashing place is like is almost like a fast food restaurant, right? You walk in, you see the price. This is how much it costs to cash a check. This is how much it costs to pay a bill, right? You know what the experience is going to be. When you walk out, you know how much you're going to have to pay, etc. So it's a
Mhm.
very concrete experience. Well, when you walk into a bank, many times the signage is not there that will help you understand, hey, how much does it cost me to have a savings account or a checking account? How much is it going to cost me to cash a check at this place, right? And and
Mhm.
and, and you may think that even these days you can cash a check on the bank, right? If it's a for instance, I work at Truist, right? If it's a
Mhm.
Truist check, like, can you cash a Truist check there? There are some banks, I'm not saying this Truist, but there are some banks that will actually charge you a fee,
Yeah,
right, to cash a check that's on the bank, right? That's
on the
written
bank
on the
itself.
bank. Yeah.
Yes.
And that
Yeah.
was that was a surprise for me, even over in the past 12 months, that I walked into a bank to cash a check that I didn't have an account in, and they charged me a fee of $10, right? That's an unexpected experience. And
Yes.
so
Yes.
many times, again, it's the fear of the unknown, right? That causes you to want to go the other way. And
Mhm.
so part of what I have been able to lead at Truist is, hey, let's bring the bank to where the people are, right? And bring
Mhm.
financial education alongside the ability to be able to start in one of our products or services, right? We call it a
Mhm.
workplace banking center of excellence, where we go to the workplace and we actually combine those two pieces together. So we have a small session where we are educating the employees. And then we
Mhm.
say, hey, if you want to take the next step with us, we're right here. You don't have to worry about coming right to the bank, figuring out what your schedule is vis-a-vis, when banks are open these days, right?
Right.
So we
Yeah.
can open up that account, for you right where you are
Mhm.
in your workplace. And so that's another piece, right? That accessibility is what we're trying
Mhm.
to solve for there. So two things: fear of the unknown and the accessibility piece, I think, are pieces that we're trying to solve in banking and in financial inclusion.
Yeah. I love that. And I'll be honest with you, I'm very experienced in a lot of different industries, but, historically, financial institutions haven't really been branded or known for being mission driven, or I mean, I'm sure some of them factor it into their overall strategic plans, but that's is not an industry that would instantly come to mind as being mission driven and creative. And um, I know you're all about the community, but it's that's not usually part of the branding. So it's so insightful to
Yeah.
hear of a position such as yours, that does focus on that. And I'm sure it's quite a change from the nonprofit sector, but it does infuse, I guess, a bit of energy and diversity into what is historically sometimes thought of as like a hard and fast, rigid kind of industry. I'm curious your thoughts on that. Am I way off and I just haven't been exposed, or is this something you're
Well,
tackling?
I will say this: there are not many of me out there, right? We all kind of
Sure.
know each other.
Yeah, I
We all
bet.
kind of travel in the same circles, right? We go to
Sure.
the same conferences, and we always running into one another.
Um,
But the work that we get to lead is absolutely incredible when
yeah,
you think
sounds like
about
it.
For instance, you talked to me about what I used to do in nonprofit. Well, at the heart of nonprofit,
Mm-hmm.
right, and at the heart of what I do at Truist is value driven leadership.
Mm-hmm.
How you influence people, how you keep purpose right at the center of your actions is relevant, no matter if you're in nonprofit or in corporate America.
Right.
People remember how you treat them, how they feel,
Yes.
right?
Yes.
In any interaction. And so if we are committed to really delivering our purpose, and that is again what I said before, to inspire and build better lives and communities, then we have to make people feel that there's something different
Mm-hmm.
about what we do, the experience that they have, right? Care is so important in terms of how we show up in both the nonprofit and the for-profit arenas.
Mm. Sounds so. And it seems like you're also not only passionate about your work at Truist, but then you have a personal passion around it as well. I
I
think it's you
do.
have either a podcast or a program called Your Finance Champ,
Yeah.
where you kind of give out information. Can you let our listeners know a little bit more about that, if you don't
Yeah,
mind?
yeah. Actually, it's a hashtag right now. So
Oh,
hashtag
okay.
finance camp.
That's
But
the way to follow.
I know, I have curated content on LinkedIn,
Nice.
Instagram, and Facebook. And all you have to do is search my name, Bahari Harris,
Okay.
Bahari Harris,
Mhm.
and you can find me there. And what I try to do on those sites is to demystify the financial services arena, right? Make it
Mhm.
more accessible. Make it such that folks who don't know much, right, can figure
Mhm.
out what those inroads are, right?
Mhm.
Can have some of their questions answered. Can feel good about some of their actions, right?
Yes.
Many
Yes.
times we don't have that positive affirmation that wait, is this the right choice? Am I making a good choice here? I want you to know, as your finance champion, yeah, when you do this, you're making a great choice, right?
Right. Right.
So that's part of how I've curated this material to make sure that people are really affirmed, right, and educated at the same time.
Gotcha. I think I was talking over you when you gave the hashtag. So can you give the hashtag again and the platforms that you share insights on?
I'll be glad to. It is hashtag your finance champ. So champ is short for champion. Hashtag your finance champ. And you can find me on LinkedIn, Instagram, and Facebook by searching my name, Bahari Harris. B as in boy, Ahari, last name Harris, Harris. And that's how you'll find me on any of those platforms I will ask you to like and follow.
Awesome. Wanted to make sure everybody got that information. We will have it in the show notes as well, but you all know me. I love to talk and converse, and sometimes I talk over my guests. So I wanted to make sure we get that valuable information out there to
Thank you.
others.
Thank you so much, Karen.
Uh, well, one other question I want to ask you, Bahar, before we
Yeah.
go to our signature question. This is a podcast on some of the best practice in leadership, and we always love to have a piece of advice or a piece of insight to leave our listeners. So, as an executive within the financial industry, what is your approach to solid, effective leadership in your areas of expertise?
Yeah, absolutely. For me, leadership is about meeting people where they are and finding the right motivators to move them forward, right? I
Mhm.
believe in leadership that comes alongside you, right? So we're not across the table. We are actually on the same side of the table looking at the issue together, right? When I
Love that.
was when I was in my early days in banking, and I was actually in the branches, right? I would actually coach my bankers to come from their side of the table and literally sit beside the client and say, hey, what are we solving for today? Right?
Yeah.
And let's
Yes.
do this together. Let's meet you where you are, decide what your options are, how to overcome those hurdles, because we are aligned shoulder to shoulder to get to your financial goals. And so that's how I lead. I really believe in making sure that I am joined with a person, join with those communities to overcome those obstacles and get to that degree of wholeness that we're all searching for.
I love that as well. I'm like you, I have many degrees as well, but one of them is in industrial organizational psychology, which is basically the psychology of the workplace.
Yep.
And with a topic that is as sensitive as financial stability, that impacts someone's sense of wellness and
Mhm.
security if things aren't going correctly. So
Right.
I love your advice to your team to go where your clients are on that side, and it turns into a more intimate conversation of where they're troubleshooting or thinking through options for
Mhm.
what will be best for them and their families. And the banks always want you to be loyal. That will definitely shoot loyalty up through the
Yeah,
to the stars if
that's
you're
right.
able to meet them.
Absolutely.
Yeah. All right. Well, Bahari, we cannot let you get out of here without asking our signature question of
Uh-huh.
you. And for my newer listeners out there, you may not realize, but my company commissioned a research study years ago on leadership execution and what it took for high performing individuals and companies to really be in that 1% of the world, if you will. And what came out were 7 big buckets of activities. We call them tactics, but activities that all leaders who were successful did. And we always love to ask our guests which of the 7 really pop for them. All 7 are equally as important, but usually there's one that really resonates. And Bahari was so kind to share that strategic decision making really resonated with him. And strategic decision making is all of what it sounds like. It's making a really good decision yourself or leading a great decision making process with your team or colleagues or whoever you're working with. So, Bahari, curious minds want to know why strategic decision making really resonated with you as one of the 7 that came out of our research.
Yeah, yeah. Well, one of the things about strategic decision making that I remember from your writing is that it's all about your judgment,
Yes.
your experience, right, and
Mhm.
then also making sure that you have the facts.
Yes.
And that is so important for me. So, for instance, when I was deciding what to do after I graduated, as a person who went to grad school for that career switch, right?
Mhm.
That's what
Right.
that's what I was there for. And I didn't know exactly what I was going to do, and all my friends were like, "Bahari the banker? Like what's that about?"
Came out of nowhere, right?
Right, like that's weird, But for me, it was the logical next step. Not only because of my experience, right, going right back to
Mhm.
the experience of what I just had in while I was in nonprofit, but also I got some great advice from folks that I put around me, right, who knew me, who knew a little bit more about the area that I was about to go into.
Uh-huh.
And one of my mentors, she said, "Hey, there are some people who their first step out of school has to be right back into impact, right? And it's a
Mhm.
private impact, right? And you have a gap, right? And your gap is you need to learn more about corporate America. You need the language of corporate America. That's why you came here." And
Mhm.
so, and when I thought about it as a gap analysis, right? I looked at the gaps in my life and my career, and I said, you know what? I need to go and fill some of those gaps, right? And so
Yeah.
from a strategic decision making sense, I needed to have an experience, take the offer on the table for me that would give me that experience. I happened when my first step out of school was a MBA leadership rotational program, right?
Mhm.
In banking, where I was able to learn things about the industry, literally end to end, soup to nuts. I was in back office operations, learning about all our systems and structures, and then I was in um, branches in the financial centers, learning about how the sausage is made, if you will, right, with the clients and the customers, and just the blocking and the tackling. And then I went
Mhm.
up to a 30,000 foot level, and I had a strategy experience with the C-suite.
Nice.
And lines of business leaders. And so again, I was able to see the whole gamut. And that
Mhm.
really did give me the tools in my toolbox that I needed to be able to apply my passion, right? That
Mhm.
was always there. The passion never left, right?
Right, right.
And it never waned, right?
Mhm.
But I needed to have those tools and resources again in my toolkit to be able to apply it appropriately so that I could have the most reach, right? So
Right,
actually, the work that I'm doing right now, right, is kind of the work that I was doing in nonprofit, but just on a much larger scale, right?
right,
Instead of
right,
just impacting one community, I'm able to impact thousands of community across our footprint, right? And
right.
for me, that is so rewarding. I may not be able to see all the people up close and personal, right?
Yeah,
That I'm able to assist with my work, but I tell you what, I know that I'm making a difference, right? I
yeah,
know that I'm opening the doors for many people, doors that haven't been opened before, right? And bringing folks in. And then sometimes I do get to actually get up close and personal with some of our clients and hear their stories, right?
yeah,
And be able to know that, okay, yep, if it was just for that one client, I made a difference. That one new homeowner, that one person who was able to get out of credit card debt, right?
yeah.
That one new student that started their account, right? Their checking account for the first.
Mhm.
I'm gonna tell you this, Karen. I still have my first checking account from when I was an undergraduate student.
Really?
Yeah, I'm gonna age myself when I say this, but almost 30 years ago, right? That I
Wow,
was
yeah.
I was an undergraduate student. I still have that account, right? And I still have part of my direct deposit going there because they were my first big yes,
Yeah,
right? And so and they've grown with me and I've grown with them. So yeah, so it's all about that for me. And again, I started talking about strategic decision making, but it's making sure that I have the facts, the experience, and then if I don't have to judge it myself, relying on others that I've surrounded myself with for my
yes, to
mentoring
weigh
team
in.
that have that right that can weigh in and have that judgment help
That's
me.
amazing.
Yep. Hmm.
Awesome. Well, I, for one, really applaud you, Truist, and all the work you're doing in all of our communities. The work is extremely important, and we need more people like you and other financial institutions. So hopefully they'll expand into this area as well. But unfortunately, we've run out of time.
Oh,
But I want to, I knew we were going to be short when we started talking. But before we let you go, we'd love for you, and you did share a little bit on your social media, but you said where people can find you. So I encourage our community to do that as well. Please, at the very minimum, listeners, go on LinkedIn and make sure you connect with Bahari, um, even on Instagram and Facebook and areas as well, if you are a part of those social media outlets, because I'm sure there are tons of more tips and heads ups and things that he'll give you, kind of inside knowledge that you might not just get by searching on Google. So, thank you so much, Bahari, for the gift of your time today. This has been absolutely tremendous.
the pleasure is certainly mine. Thank you so much, Karen, for having me.
Absolutely. And thank you too, listeners, for the gift of your time as well. As I always say, we know that there are literally millions of other podcasts you can be listening to, and we do not take your patronage lightly at all. All that we ask is that you like and subscribe on your favorite platform of choice and share our podcast with just one friend, because by doing so, it'll help us all to better lead at the top of our games. Thanks so much, and see you next week. And that's our show for today. Thank you for listening to the Lead at the Top of Your Game podcast, where we help you lead your seat at any employer, business, or industry in which you choose to play. You can check out the show notes, additional episodes, bonus resources, and also submit guest recommendations on our website at leadyourgamepodcast.com. You can follow me on Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, and LinkedIn by searching for the name Karen Rhodes, with Karen being spelled Karan. And if you like the show, the greatest gift you can give would be to subscribe and leave a rating on your podcast platform of choice. This podcast has been a production of Shockingly Different Leadership, a global consultancy which helps organizations execute their people, talent development, and organizational effectiveness initiatives on an on-demand project or contract basis. Huge thanks to our production and editing team for a job well done. Goodbye for now.